G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be talking about one of the first new planes to be introduced to the patch. That is the long awaited Lightning F6. Well, really just any of the Lightnings. And honestly, it's kind of weird. It's kind of interesting. It's not particularly amazing, to be honest. It's still fun. Yeah, it's very heavy, very fat, and one of the things that I don't really like about planes is if they're too heavy, they don't seem to be as good fun as the lighter ones. Although but the Spitfire, it's an interceptor. It's not meant to fight other fighters. Okay, I get what you're saying. Let's have a look at it in an interceptor role. All right, so we're having a look at here. This bomber, look at this thing. He doesn't stand a chance. Look at that missile out and crisp, beautiful shot there. The Aiden cannons, yep, good bomber interceptor, perfect plane, nothing wrong with it. 100%, 10 out of 10. All right, jokes aside, we're gonna have a pretty serious look at this plane. Because for me, I honestly think that this plane could have come a lot earlier than it actually did. It is, in my opinion, not worthy of 10.0. It's worthy of 10.3. If you look at it from the bottom up. Planes at 9.0 don't really deserve to see this thing. Think about the F2 Sabre. Poor F2 Sabre doesn't stand a chance against this thing. Think about all the other proper 10.3s, like the 10.3s from the bottom up. Discounting the very top jets, think of the things that would otherwise be a really good 10.3. The T2 is a really good example of this, the MiG-19. These two planes go really well with the English Electric Lightning. And post-buff, the MiG-19 PT and the MiG-19S are really, really good opponents for this thing. It seems to blend well with these three. It's good. It's really nice and fun. The missiles on all of these vehicles are they're not amazing. The red tops are slow. They tend to take a little bit of time to track. Even though they do have a 16G overload, I don't feel like they're quite as good as, say, the other compatriots, the R60s, other things. These things apparently have head-on lock capabilities, but the plane that it's locking onto needs to be supersonic because there's friction involved, and the friction on the surface is enough for the infrared seeker to actually pick it up. And I thought, that's really damn interesting. So I believe Koala told me that one. So if anyone else can confirm, then please do. But one of the things that I really like about the Lightning is its low-speed dogfighting capability, which you wouldn't really expect. But the fact that this thing can dump a lot of speed, and because it's got a revised set of wings from the F3, I think it is really, really nice at subsonic speeds. And obviously you won't come across subsonic speeds too often. But in the case where you're going to be dogfighting a T2 or a MiG-19, this thing actually is kind of cool. I really like it. The interesting bit is when you come up against MiG-21s and F4 Phantoms. You see, the name of the game with jets is energy. And if you can keep energy above an opponent, then you win. That's as simple as that. That's why I say never turn, or speed is key in jets. Now, you can see me here dumping a lot of speed, and that's to stay behind this T2, and the Lightning is actually fairly good at it. I had a lot of issues with the Lightning on patch day because I would just come up against Phantoms that would simply keep a lot of energy above me. They'd climb better than me. They'd do pretty much a lot of things better than me, but things like the T2, the MiG-19, I'm genuinely enjoying dogfighting them. F100, I am genuinely enjoying fighting them. It is something that I've discovered in the past few days. It has been extremely stressful playing this plane against Phantoms, to the point where I've felt like being a salty boy and rage quitting and doing rage quit things. But honestly, the fun is when these T2s and MiG-19s show up. Look at this T2 coming in here, and this MiG-21 motherfucker coming in here. MF motherfucker, get it? I'm good with these. And look at him going vertical, thinking that he can outdo me when I burnt a lot of energy for him. Now, this thing holds energy a little bit better than the MiG-21 and a little bit worse than the T2, I would say. From what I can tell, it doesn't quite accelerate as well as I thought it would, and that's probably down to its sheer weight. MiG-21 doesn't stand a chance with the red top at low speed, and that's where I would probably be using my red tops, not at any high speeds, just because these things don't have solid tracking at high speeds. They don't seem to be as responsive from what I've been able to discover. If I'm wrong, then do tell me otherwise, but this is like 3 days from patch, and we're still, figuring out things, and it's cool. So, T2 is going to come in here, and I'm going to put myself into a vertical. You can see I'm already at 600, dropping that down to 500, and putting it finally into the vertical, going down to 400, making sure that that missile doesn't come in and take my asshole. T2 is going to come in, and because the T2 is pretty much, obviously he's been beaten up a little bit, but the T2 is not good below 600 kilometers per hour. It is an absolute bust below that speed because it has really tiny wings, and it's essentially just a rocket ship. So the way that the T2 functions is kind of interesting when you look at the F6, because the F6 is a little bit better at low speed handling, but doesn't accelerate, and it doesn't have that high speed as well, and you don't seem to be able to reach those high speeds as well as the F6. However, when you get into that low speed turn fight, it is pretty much your game, and that's where the fun for me really begins. Where it tends to sort of, I think, end is when the Phantoms show up, because they can just keep energy over you all day. And it, to me, speaks of a different problem. It's not the lightning that is the problem, it is the battle ratings that it fights. The F6 is a 10.0, and whilst I do think that for now 10.0 is decent, 10.3 would be a lot better, because it represents what we're looking at from a bottom-up perspective. From a top-down perspective, it would be a 9.7, and what do I mean by this? I mean that it is not worth facing the Phantoms constantly day in, day out. Quite simply, it is not a plane that should be fighting against these things regularly. It should obviously see them, because it is very similar, but anyway, moving on to the next match, you can see that once you are on low speed, you are pretty much Phantom food, and again, you'll see me here climbing. This is something that I've had to start doing in top tier jets, and obviously at these higher tiers, that makes a bit more sense, because the afterburner gives you better performance at altitude. Also, the fact that you have missiles that will force you to turn and dump 200, 300 kilometers of speed very quickly, whereas at the lower battle ratings, like 8.7, you don't really have as many missiles, and you don't have as powerful missiles, so you can simply roll out of the way. Now, for me, what the Lightning really is a dogfighter. It sounds really stupid because it's an interceptor, and it was meant to fight the V-bombers. But in the game, we have multiple interceptors fighting together. The Phantom is an interceptor. The MiG-21 is an interceptor. See, the further we go up, you see this change because of the way history works. And, you see this with the advent of Heat FS at about 7.0, 7.7 in tanks. And you see it the same way with planes. The higher we go, when we get to the supersonics, the historical consensus was that the V-bombers were the biggest threat. And you can see that the nations surrounding, the powerful European nations at the time had put that in mind. And you can see it's basically more or less interceptor v interceptor at this point. Obviously, the MiG-19 is not, and the F4E is a more dogfighting version. We all know that. But let's politely ignore that for now as we go into battle against said Phantoms. Now, the Lightning actually works fairly well in a pack. The F4E here is sort of looking towards this other EJ Phantom, and despite using flares below about 1.5 kilometers, flares are actually useless, which is interesting because I believe these things have sort of, I can't remember what it's called, but basically it counters the countermeasure, which is the flare, and it basically learns to ignore it through a computer program or algorithm or something. Now, the Phantom is probably the meta at the moment, simply because it's able to keep its energy. The MiG-21 bleeds too much in a turn, and to evade missiles you need to turn. The Phantoms don't get that luxury. They don't turn as well, just enough perhaps to evade the missiles. But it is still, for me, one of the more interesting metas. I do think the MiG-21 SMT and the MF should be at 10.7 or 11.0, and I do think the F4E and perhaps the F4C could potentially be at 10.7 as well, or 11.0, or somewhere in between. This the Lightning is a bit of a struggle. There's no doubt about that. It is not the meta, and there's no way it was going to be. It probably would have been the meta if it was introduced with the Locked On patch, which was about this time last year. For me, I think the Lightning is a year too late. But you know what? We have it now, so at least we can make a go of it. It is a good, fun plane, and it is gorgeous. The multifunction display as well, with I think it's Y by default, is really, really good. And it helps sort of smoothen out things, makes them a little bit more efficient. Having to dogfight phantoms is kind of fun. It just becomes a little bit tedious when you get into multiple engagements. And having a good team is really, really important. So in this case, thank you to my absolutely amazing team who managed to stomp the battlefield. Mad respect to anyone who gets good teams and are very lucky like that. As for the Phantoms, I think they're going to run because they have more missiles, they have better missiles, they have better performance. And that's just how it goes. So what should be done? I just think a little bit of battle rating decompression, and that's pretty much it. Maybe reducing some other things. But until then, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.